In 1994, Westone and Sega released what would, for the longest time, be the finale of the Monster World series, and as far as I'm concerned, they went out with a bang. Monster World 4 is an incredible game, filled with fun and well-designed mechanics, charming visuals, and catchy music. There was only one major problem with the game. As great as it was, it remained exclusive to Japan for almost 20 years until Sega decided to finally release an official English translation of the game, which is something that really doesn't happen as much as you'd think. In the following years, the series has seen quite a resurgence, and I personally consider Monster World 4's official English release to be the catalyst of it all. So now we've come full circle, as this game has finally gotten the remake treatment following the amazing Dragon's Trap remake by Lizard Cube. But does it live up to the expectations that have now been set? And more importantly, does it make the Genesis game obsolete? For those who never played the original, the story is about Asha, a courageous young girl who decides to take the path of a warrior when she senses that someone needs her help. She sets off on a quest to prove herself worthy of being a warrior to the Queen, and after officially being dubbed as such, gains the assistance of an adorable creature called a Pepelagoo. Together they go through different parts of Monster World to free the spirits and save the kingdom from the darkness that slowly envelops it as the game progresses. As you can see from the footage, this remake takes the series in a different direction visually. Studio Arc Dink decided to go with the 2.5D art style, and honestly I'm not a fan of it. While the animations are pretty well done, and I love Asha's enthusiasm to open treasure chests, the overall visual fidelity doesn't look much better than something you'd find on the 3DS or Vita. In fact, I'm almost willing to bet that this started development as a 3DS game, but I digress. I should point out that I played the PS4 version through the PS5's backwards compatibility, so when it comes to performance, it was mostly a smooth 60 frames per second, as should be expected for a game that looks like this. But every once in a while, the game would stutter for what felt like a couple of frames. It may be hard to notice watching footage, but playing the game it will be noticeable, and can be a little frustrating. I realize it may sound like I'm nitpicking too much about a remake of a game that, in the grand scheme of things, is still pretty niche, but I don't think it's unreasonable to expect something more when compared to Monster Boy or the previously mentioned Dragon's Trap remake. I know all of these games are done by different developers, but seeing as this one had the series creator on board, it definitely feels like they dropped the ball in this department. The music, on the other hand, lives up to expectations just fine. Gen Watanabe returned to bring the soundtrack up to modern standards, and while I still personally prefer how it all sounds on the Genesis, I wouldn't say anything sounds offensive here. Unfortunately, the presentation is just a mixed bag, but I'm at least happy to say that as far as gameplay goes, they mostly nailed it. The controls are very responsive, and as far as I'm concerned, they feel one-to-one to the original, along with a subtle improvement where if you use the analog stick, you'll run if you hold it all the way, instead of having to double tap the D-pad, which is how I primarily played it, as I never really saw much of a reason to walk instead of run. The one aspect I'm a little questionable on is the way you explore the town. The original had secrets that could be discovered behind buildings and from jumping through rooftops. To do this in the remake, you have to find certain spots that allow you to switch between planes, and while you get used to it, it just overall feels awkward and non-intuitive. This is another aspect of the game that makes me feel like it was intended for the 3DS. The actual dungeons, though, are pretty faithful to how they were originally, so it feels weird that they took those liberties, but to be fair, you only need to do it if you're going for all the life drops, which aren't required to beat the game. This game puts me in a really awkward position. It's really not bad from an objective standpoint, as it's still Monster World 4 through and through at its core, but it's the squandered potential that makes me ill towards this game more than anything else. And I'd say $40 is a bit steep for this game, considering it's not a long game at all, and there really wasn't anything new added. Even if you've never played the Genesis game, there's still other ways to play it in English for a fraction of the price, like the Monster World collection on Xbox, for instance, which includes the original, along with 2 other games in the series for only $10. There is a silver lining to this remake though. Even if you aren't a fan of it, if you buy it physically on PS4 or Switch, you get the original Genesis game with it, And while the PS4 version is relegated to a download code, the Switch version actually includes it on the cartridge itself, making this the first time the game has been officially released in English in a physical format. So if you're a huge fan of the original, it may actually be worth picking up the Switch version just for that fact alone. Otherwise, I would say your $40 would be better spent on Monster Boy. It's a much longer game with amazing visuals and music, and it seems to go on sale all the time. Despite my disappointment, I still look forward to the future of this series, and maybe this will pave the way for a new game starring Asha and Pepelagoo. Honestly, the prospect of that does have me pretty excited. But we'll just have to wait and see. This has been FumeiCom, and if you ever find a treasure chest somewhere, don't be embarrassed about shaking your ass before opening it.